Hey guys, this is day number 3 of David's Daily Thoughts. Today, I don't really have a title thought out, but I'm sure I'll think of something here soon. We have a ton of financial and political news going on today, and I really don't like delving too much into the politics of right now because a lot of it is, mainstream media, pomp and circumstance, outrage, blah, 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 blah. It's not of substance, okay? But we're going to talk about a couple different subjects here, and then I think today we're going to talk a little bit about the manufacturing crisis that I think we're facing here in 2023. I think that's probably what I'm going to focus this video on. Some things we're going to talk about today when it comes to finance and politics/news. We have more documents that were supposed to be classified that were found by Joe Biden's aides in different locations now, I think separately from the Washington, D.C. Penn Biden think tank that were found. We have the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, which is coming out tomorrow at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, and that'll kind of reflect the inflation numbers coming up for the next month or so, or kind of show us where inflation is coming in at, if we've made any headway whatsoever with the Fed increased rates. We also need to talk about the COVID vaccine mandate that's been dropped now, I believe, in the military, and I think that's all Pentagon contractors and military service members in general. There's also a proposed gas stove ban in New York, and I don't know if that's federal, so someone correct me on if that's just a New York state thing, maybe just a state thing for them. Closer to home here, I live in Indiana, but right next to us in Illinois, there was an assault rifle ban, and they also got rid of some of the, I guess you'd call them accessories that allow assault rifles to be more automatic, and some more accessories that allow for larger magazines and other things like that. So those are some really important topics. Let's see, the FAA computer system went down this morning, Federal Aviation Administration, which is part of the DOT, I believe, led by Pete Buttigieg, Hoosier. That went down early this morning. I believe it came up before 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but there was a whole mess, another huge mess in the airports, which that's a whole other story we'll talk about. And then last financial thing is the BlackRock organization, which is they manage about $10 trillion in assets in the world. I don't know how to say that properly, but they're managing about $10 trillion in assets. They laid off quite a few people here recently, or will be laying off quite a few people here in the future, which is obviously not very good for a lot of people. So let's talk about manufacturing first. And I was just discussing with my dad the same thing. We've seen a lot of cyclical phases here in the past 2-3 years with the COVID-19 pandemic. Our company in particular faced a lot of hurdles when it came to manufacturing for truck parts and other stuff like that around the 2021-2022 era. That specifically, it was a lot of metal parts, stainless steel, and fabricated parts that were having a hard time getting out, and these lead times were a little bit insane. Some of these were like 6 to 8 month lead times in order to have parts made, specifically like fabricated parts, which is just an astronomical amount of time, especially if you're putting this on a truck, trucks that are on the road that are transporting goods all over the country. And we had a really, really hard time getting parts for probably a year plus, 6 to 8 month lead times on almost everything. And that was a huge problem for us. And that was caused, from what I understand, obviously, I'm not a transportation industry executive or expert, but from what I understand, there was a steel shortage for quite a lot of time, which then caused steel prices to be raised, which we've had a 20 to 35% price increase on pretty much all of the parts that we purchase. And then on top of that, there was a lot of skilled labor that we were missing here in the market. They couldn't hire enough people in order to make these parts in time, and so a lot of them were just being produced on one shift instead of 2-3 shifts at these manufacturing facilities. So it was extremely difficult for us to get parts, which caused a lot of problems getting orders out on time, building trucks on time, and just caused a giant amount of chaos in our industry. And trucking in general, and transportation in general, already has a hard enough time with regulations. And with increased fuel prices, we had almost $6. I think we actually hit $6 diesel at one point, which is just not sustainable for making money in the trucking industry. And then on top of that, we have regulation with the ELD, which is the electronic log. Oh my gosh, I'm totally spacing that. The ELD is essentially a log that goes in newer trucks that have emissions on them that allows you to have the truck run for a certain amount of time. It's 14 hours is the maximum amount of time a truck driver in one of these ELD trucks is allowed to run before they have to take a break. That was a big factor that went in. I think that might have been 2019 or 2020 when that was rolled out. So it was a combination of a lot of things that hit all at the same time with the manufacturing, with the regulations. We had the mask mandates that came out, obviously, and a lot of other things that kind of crushed the trucking industry and caused a lot of people, especially owner-operators who have 1 to 5 trucks, that really suffered, and some of them went out of business or parked their trucks or sold them. And just got out. So the manufacturing industry, I still don't think has recovered fully. We still have between 4 to 8 week lead times on pretty much everything, and it has caused us to pull back on our ordering. And we've started to make a lot of our own stuff in-house, that's exactly why we started doing that with the CNC plasma and some of the parts we make here is because we couldn't get parts on time. And we need those parts in order to sell them and build trucks and do all of their kinds of stuff. So manufacturing now has gone from a model of being 6 to 8 months out on parts to being, let's just say 4 to 8 weeks, which is, a fraction of the time. But the problem is we had set up our business model so that we were purchasing a lot of parts at one time in order to get them and hold them as inventory, because we assumed that we wouldn't be getting parts for months and months and months, and we really didn't know what the lead times were going to be, so we were trying to stock up and carry as much as we possibly could with the hope that would hold us over until the next shipment of parts that would come in. Well, the problem now we have is that now that lead times have gone down and demand for parts have gone down, we don't need as many parts because we can just order them, and it might take, a month or 2 to get them, but customers can deal with that. They can't deal with 6 to 8 month lead times, right? So now we are sitting on a ton of inventory that is extremely hard to get rid of, and those are some of the problems that we have now, is sitting on too much inventory and not being able to get rid of a lot of that because demand has completely plummeted. And with how gas prices are starting to creep up again, and the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is starting to wane, I think we may see those diesel prices eke up again, and then we're going to have more demand problems. So we're all trying to orientate ourselves in the industry for that. It's going to be extremely interesting to see what happens, but I think it's not just in our industry and truck parts. It's going to be all over. In food and in paper goods and in everything. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how supply chains are fixed or not fixed and how that impacts the upcoming recession. So that's my little manufacturing spiel for the day. It's been extremely hard in the truck part industry over the past, I'd say, 6 months to a year in order to get everything figured out in that regard. I feel like we're always behind the ball and always trying to play catch up. But I think we're going to get to a point where we can make everything or make most things by ourselves, or at least within Indiana, we can have most things made and control our supply chain the way we want to. So that's manufacturing. Let's talk about classified Biden documents real quick. I talked about this, I don't know if it was 2 days ago or yesterday, but obviously it's never good to have classified documents outside of an environment where they shouldn't be. The first release was about 10 documents. I think they said almost 10 documents that Biden had that were classified that were handed over to the State Department. Okay, fine. I don't know more details on this second batch, but I would assume it's probably more than 10. And it goes to a pretty, it goes back to a pretty common problem that we're having now of pretty much every politician is hoarding these classified documents and taking them basically wherever they want. We shouldn't have that, obviously. The real problem I have with this is the way that the media is continuously spinning this for Joe Biden in order to cover for him. When it came to Donald Trump, it seemed very, very apparent that they were after him, and the Mar-a-Lago raid and the FBI investigation and the Merrick Garland incidents of the investigation and stuff. they really wanted to get down his shorts and see what was going on down there with his classified documents. With this whole deal, we have just about every media organization running a smokescreen for Joe Biden about how they were turned over, and it was only 10 documents, and he didn't know, and then we have the second batch that comes out, and it's like, okay, well, how many more batches are there? What are these documents? What kind of security problems are these going to create? And so on. So we'll see how this story develops, but it just seems like a really, really two-sided event that really kind of takes the mask off of the mainstream media and also the Biden administration of what's really going on, and how politicians are not held to account if they're a Democrat. Anyway, getting on to the CPI, Consumer Price Index, we had it come in, I believe, lower, was the last one we had in December. I believe it came in lower than what we thought it was going to be. We just need to see basically that the CPI is not going to be blown out of the water, and I don't know if that's going to be true. I know that fuel has gone down, but I have seen food prices continue to rise. Metal prices have continued to rise. This is raw steel. Parts have continued to rise. We've had price increases from almost all of our vendors here in the truck part industry, and I think that's going to be pretty broad within most parts and machinery. It's going to continue to increase. This is obviously, the Consumer Price Index is a list of products that our consumers would buy, not necessarily a manufacturing facility or a truck part store. But my point is, it's going to be interesting. I think we may come in excuse me, I keep punching this. I need to put this away. I think we're going to come in slightly ahead of where we were last time. I think the increase in eggs, in prices in eggs, is really going to cause a lot of alarm for people. The price of eggs has skyrocketed. And I think it's going to be interesting. So I will talk about the CPI more tomorrow on Thursday's episode, episode number 4, and we'll talk a little bit about the implications of what the CPI report comes out with, and where we can go from there, because it's going to be very revealing of what the future is going to look like for policy, and for the policy for the Fed, and the policy for a lot of businesses and consumers of what they're going to be spending their money on here in the future. So that's CPI. COVID vaccine mandate being dropped by the Pentagon. I think that also includes contractors, military personnel, things like that. That's fantastic. I think in general, there shouldn't have been a vaccine mandate in the beginning. I don't want to use the word anti-vaxxer. I am not an anti-vaxxer whatsoever. I think everyone should be vaccinated for extremely important viruses like measles and chickenpox, and I mean, there's a list, tuberculosis, and just go down the list, right? I've gotten all my vaccines when I was a child. Totally okay with those. Did not get the COVID vaccine. Will never get the COVID vaccine. It should not have been mandated for anybody. It was a choice. Should have been a choice. And the fact that the government mandated that from the beginning is pretty atrocious. And I'm glad it's now gone. So that's good. I did hear, however, that the COVID emergency state or whatever has been extended by Joe Biden. I think it was coming to an end here recently, and it's been extended again. I don't think that's true whatsoever. I think we've seen a huge drop in COVID cases, and I think everyone now is not immune, but we have a lot of herd immunity that's happening within the United States that would prevent us from extending that state of emergency. So that's all I'll say on COVID, because it's going to be a mess on YouTube with all their whatever rules and regulations about talking about COVID. Gas stove ban. Man, that one's interesting. I heard from, I saw a news story about New York State banning gas stoves. Completely ridiculous. I don't know what else to say besides that. I don't know what the percentage would be of people that cook with gas versus cook with electric, but gas stoves are superior. Most of the fumes and the I guess the carbon that's produced by cooking is mostly from the oils and the other things that you use to actually cook the food, not from the actual gas that is burnt. So this is just another way for the government. It seems like it's another way for the government to get into your house and to tell you what you can and can't use, and it's just ridiculous. If you really wanted to reduce the carbon footprint of our society, stop flying all of these jets all over specifically military jets all over the place. I mean, we have billionaires and politicians flying all over the world in their private jets or their government jets, and I just don't want to hear it anymore. It's not the common citizen, it's not the farmers who are causing all of the carbon carbon buildups and the increase in temperatures. That's not who's doing it. Okay, it's just not. And so this is ridiculous. I hope New York votes this down. I think if this is passed in New York, which I don't think it ever would be, I think no one's going to listen. Okay, first of all, no one is going to give up their gas stoves. Restaurants will never give up their gas stoves because they will be unbelievably less efficient. And it's just ridiculous. If it happens on a federal level, it's just, it's all just, I don't even know, circus. It's a giant circus. So, ridiculous story. Can't believe that we're at this point in the country, but here we are. Illinois assault rifle ban. This one's important. Illinois, they banned the sale, I think it was delivery, sale, and registration, I guess, of, not registration, but delivery, sale, and trade of assault rifles of, I think it's any kind. And if you do have an assault rifle in Illinois, you're going to be required to register it with the state. So, totally unconstitutional. Obviously, the Second Amendment protects the right of the people to bear arms, and there's no bylines on that. There's no qualifications on that constitutional amendment. There's nothing in the Bill of Rights that says that you can only have this kind of gun. It's not in there. So Illinois, which is right next door, which is kind of terrifying, is one of the most crime-ridden states, if not the most crime-ridden state in the country. Illinois is not Illinois. Chicago is a literal war zone. We call it Chirac here in Indiana. There are, I don't even know, dozens of shootings every weekend. Dozens of people killed every weekend on the south side of Chicago. And it's not because of legal guns. It's not because of assault rifles. It's not because of people are owning bump stocks. It's not because of people owning, high capacity magazines. It's because there are illegal guns being used by career criminals who will not be put in jail. Because there are super lenient prosecutors in Chicago and even in the western part of Indiana, like Gary, Indiana, and places like that. And these people will not put these gang members in jail. They won't take the crime seriously. And we have a massive drug problem in Chicago that is not being curbed whatsoever. And then on top of that, I'm not a big fan of the drug war. The Nixon drug war it's been a total failure, obviously. But this is one of the ramifications of that drug war is that all these gangs are fighting over the black market for drugs and now sex trafficking and human trafficking of all kinds and territory in Chicago. And so their solution to this problem is to ban all assault rifles. And I think their reasoning behind this was not necessarily gang activity. I think it was a massacre of people that... I think there were 7 or 8 people that were killed with a firearm. I don't think it was an assault rifle, however, almost a year ago in Illinois. And while I absolutely feel for those families, I feel for those people who were killed by that attack. It is not the fault of law-abiding gun owners, especially assault rifle owners, that people die in those cases. And I do think good guns in the hands of good people save more people than are killed by legal or illegal guns held by bad people. So carry a gun at all times. In Illinois, now you can't. I don't even know if you can get a concealed carry license. I think it's really restrictive if you can. In Indiana, we're constitutional carry now, and I carry all the time. Carry a gun. Protect yourself, because law enforcement won't do it anymore. And there are people that are bad that are out there that are going to try and come and get you. I mean, I'm not telling you that that's going to happen, but there might be. And with the way things are going in big cities and how these prosecutors are not putting people behind bars, the only person that you can rely on is yourself. So, stay strapped. That's all I can say for that. Let's do 2 quick ones. FAA computer system down this morning. Pete Buttigieg, I guess I don't even know what his title is. It's like the secretary of the Department of Transportation or whatever. Giant joke. I mean, he was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, which is about 2 hours north of us. Totally ineffectual then. Took a giant vacation, paternity leave, because he's married to a man. I have no problem with gays or gays having children or anything like that. I don't care. But he has more important things to do than sit at home. because if he's the secretary of the DOT, he should be doing like something along the lines of transportation. But anyway, he's had the first big problem that I knew of that I really didn't like about Pete was this continuous problem with the railway system and the pension with the railway workers. The Democrats are waving that as a giant flag, saying, "Hey, we won. We've basically set off this vote or set off this problem for another couple months or years until this pension problem for the railway workers is really going to come to a head." That was the first thing that kind of pissed me off about Pete. The second thing was the huge crisis chaos that was created around the giant winter storm that happened in late 2022. My biggest problem with that was that we knew this storm was coming for quite a while, and instead of trying to prepare using the DOT and resources of the DOT and the FAA and trying to make sure that things were going to be at least a little bit smoother than what they were, Pete's solution was to basically let the crisis happen, let people get stranded, let all of this terrible stuff happen over the holidays, and then after it was over, then he was going to open up, and he did open up investigations on all of these airlines like Southwest and Delta and all these places, all these airline companies that had problems during this giant winter storm. So it just seems like we don't want to get ahead of the problem. We just want to blame people after it's over. And it's the same thing with this computer system thing going down today. If our FAA is having hacking problems with their system when it comes to flight controls, and flight data and stuff like that, maybe we should take a look at that, and maybe we should update our systems and get it to the point where we can't be hacked or we can't have it go down like that, instead of, once again, after the fact, after the chaos has happened, after people are mad, then we open up an investigation on, why is this happening? Get ahead of the problem. Get off your ass and get ahead of the problem. Maybe go and do your job instead of sitting at home and doing God knows what. So that's my belief on Pete Buttigieg. I'm extra salty about him because he's a Hoosier, and you would think that he would be more conservative in his role of what he's supposed to be doing in the government as a public servant and making sure people are getting to where they need to be and the transportation health of our country, but it doesn't seem like that's a priority for him. So that's why I'm a little bit salty about that. Last thing, it's already been 22 minutes, so let me get this real quick. BlackRock is laying off 500 plus people, employees over the next couple months. It'll be more than that. BlackRock, they manage about $10 trillion in assets. They had a loss last year, which they don't like to talk about, of $1.7 trillion. And this is just the beginning of the layoffs that are going to happen with BlackRock. So this is what happens when you invest in environmental blah, 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 EV crap that nobody wants to buy. This is what happens when you handle that many assets as one company. This is what happens when you have a prolonged recession that people don't want to acknowledge is happening. This is what happens when you spend $4 or $5 trillion as a government agent, or as the government as a whole, on COVID spending and cause massive inflation that then devalues the dollar, and people don't want to invest, and then the Fed rates continue to rise and rise and rise, and people don't want to get mortgages or car loans, and then those assets are starting to go away. So not surprised whatsoever. This will continue to happen with more and more companies. So there you go. That's pretty much my news and updates for the day. Let's see, we've done 3 days in a row now. I'm really excited about this. If you want to follow me on social media, it is David Coleman on YouTube. It is David Coleman 27 on Instagram and Rumble. It is Colema, Colema 63 ETH on Twitter. That's what I use most of all. And those are the big ones. Follow me there, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll definitely be talking about the CPI report tomorrow and whatever the heck happens tomorrow on Thursday. So thanks so much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.